Hey friends, welcome back. Today on the show, we're talking about dating in midlife. Joining us today is Stanley, who publishes The Crush Letter, a weekly lifestyle newsletter exploring pop culture, love, friendship, and sex for an audience over 40. Dish is a former lawyer and active angel investor, was widowed in her 40s and dated through her 50s. She's been midlife dating for over a decade and is on today to share her advice and expertise. So, we've covered dating in midlife before with a relationship therapist, Liz Earnshaw, but I really believe that we can learn so much from our girlfriends. And I feel like this is sort of your girlfriend's guide to dating from somebody who's out there actively dating and has been doing so for, as Dish said, for over a decade. So welcome, Dish. I'm so happy to have you on the show today.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Okay, so we're going to dive right in and just tell us, how has midlife dating been for you? What's it like out there?
I have to say that I love dating right now. And I feel as if I've come into a period of my life where I'm actually finally good at dating and really enjoying dating. And that's come at the end. It's sort of been an arc for me, and it's come at the end of, or I would say after really some rocky points in my dating life. This is actually a really very good time for me to talk about dating because I feel like I finally know how to do it, at least for me.
Okay, I love
Um,
this so much. Well, thank you for saying that. Do you think it would be helpful to understand sort of where you came? Like, take us a little bit more into that arc of your midlife dating so we have a sense of kind of why you feel like you are where you are, and maybe the women can learn from some of the rough patches too.
so I was, widowed in my 40s and I was happily married. And I would say that when I first started dating, I was very confident about relationships and my ability to be a good partner. And I was very hopeful and optimistic about finding a partner. I felt, even though I had a lot of grief from losing my husband, I felt so positive about relationships and marriage. And so I went into dating with really a very optimistic, happy outlook about, meeting people, meeting men, and, finding a relationship. I think that dating in my 40s and 50s was extraordinarily difficult. It's so much more difficult than in your 20s, and for reasons that you don't anticipate. I had a couple of 2 or 3 year relationships during that period, and those relationships, didn't work out, and they fell into what I think are pretty common categories for people in terms of, sort of difficult patches in relationships.
Okay, so can we dive into a little bit more about what happened? Because it sounds like you came from a very happy marriage. And so when you said you had a positive outlook, it's because you had a positive experience and then you were, starting again. So you came with that love in your heart that from your positive journey. And so if you could also touch upon, you said that it also was harder and than in your 20s. And I would imagine maybe part of that is maybe people have kids and, they've been divorced and there's other people in the picture too. But please share what feels relevant and right to you.
So to begin with, I started dating somebody who I had been friends with for quite a while. He was actually friends with my husband and me, and we knew him well. And he was separating from his wife, and completely separate and apart from me. But he had was living separately from his wife, and had they had a really sort of difficult long-term marriage, and we flowed into a relationship really easily, and it was really wonderful and positive in so many ways because we had a basis for a good relationship. We were together, probably a couple of years, and he just really wasn't able to disentangle from that marriage and that family structure.
Yeah.
And his wife ended up getting ill before the divorce was finalized. So even though he was living in a different state from her, he ended up moving home to take care of her. Wow. And they never finalized the divorce. And so that ended that way. And the next guy that I dated has a different story, but as it relates to this story of dating men who are separated, I dated a couple of other men who were living separate lives from their wives and finalizing their divorce, and had been in marriages where they had agreed that as soon as the youngest child went to college, they were going to separate. They had a very non-contentious, mutual agreement on that. And then I dated two guys like that, and they both ended up going back to their wives. In one case, their oldest child got engaged to be married, and they realized at that point, the divorce hadn't been finalized, but they realized that they did not want to spend the rest of their lives sharing grandchildren and not being together on the occasion of their child's wedding. And it sort of threw into relief for them all of the family things that they were giving up. And I would say that I had gotten so much advice from people about dating men who were separated. And most of the advice was that as long as it was like not a contentious separation, and that they were not separated because of me, but they were already separated and living a separate life from their wife, divorce takes forever, especially if the men are wealthy, or if there's money in there, it takes forever. And if you were to decide not to date any men who were separated, you would lose your shot at men who are the most partner oriented. They're coming out of marriages, meaning they're partner oriented. So you have to, take the risk of dating separated men. And three separate relationships, the men ended up going back to their wives. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that was a whole category.
That's so interesting. But I guess that's what makes it different than dating in your 20s, right?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I think there is something for people who are separated about in your dating in your 40s and 50s. A lot is happening for them as a family and with their kids.
Yeah.
And I think they start to see what it will mean for their relationships with their kids and with their grandkids, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
That they hadn't imagined before. Yeah.
That's interesting.
And then, I'm sorry.
No, please go, please.
And then there's a whole other category of problems, which I will just call bandwidth. In your 40s and 50s, there are so many bandwidth issues. Everyone is still in their big career focused years.
Interesting.
And people have joint custody of their kids. So every other weekend, at least, they have their kids, and 1 or 2 days a week.
Yeah.
And they have a big job. Often the jobs require travel. And just getting time together and making the time together to have the relationship develop and grow, it became a real issue. I had a big job at that point in time, and most of the men that I dated were the primary breadwinners. And so they're, if not the sole breadwinners. And so they took their role as breadwinners, very, very seriously.
Yeah.
And they also took their role as fathers very, very seriously.
Yeah. Which is probably why you were attracted to them, because they were solid men, like good men.
And I wouldn't want to date a man who didn't take his
Of
role as
course.
a father or a
Right.
son
Right.
very seriously. I started dating one guy who was the primary breadwinner, had 3 kids, and then, his mother got sick.
Oh, yeah.
He just had, that relationship broke up for bandwidth issues. But what's interesting to me is my brother is divorced and has 3 kids and is the sole breadwinner. And he, at one point, just stopped dating. And I would say, what's going on? Why aren't you dating? And he said, I cannot prioritize a relationship, and it's not fair to anyone that I date.
Interesting.
That I cancel on them constantly if anything comes up with the child. And I thought, I started looking at it from his perspective, and I understood why I was encountering so many issues.
Yeah.
He's 2 years younger than I am, so we're basically at the same stage. And he basically just got married. And that's because his kids are much older and he has a lot more bandwidth now to actually develop a relationship.
Yeah. So if I'm hearing you, it's when you're entering in midlife dating, there's so many more layers. There's obligations, family issues, right? And what the man or the partner is prioritizing or what they have bandwidth for. So in terms of cultivating and developing a relationship, that makes it a lot more challenging.
Yeah, it really does. It really does. Yeah. And it's understandable too. There's nobody.
Oh yeah, no, it sounds like they're solid guys, which is probably why you were attracted to them, but that also makes it hard. And, I know that there's a lot of women who are newly divorced or recently lost a partner and they're ready to open up to dating again, Dish, but they're scared and they don't really know where to start. So something obviously shifted. So before we start giving them some advice, I'm just curious, you said you're in such a good place now. So what shifted for you? What changed?
So this is a difficult story for me, but because so many of the men that I have met and dated are such wonderful people. And I love men and I love their company. I really do. But one man that I was in a really serious 3.5 year relationship with, our relationship shifted because he moved 3 hours away. So we went from living near each other to living separately. And when that happened, because he had a big job and he had kids in college and other family responsibilities, we weren't as close. But we were still very serious. We spent every weekend together. We spent 4 nights a week together, essentially. And he went on a 2-week conference for work. We were about 3.5 years into our relationship. And he came back from the conference and he said that he had fallen in love with another woman.
And in 2 weeks, though, that doesn't sound like love to me. No, but anyway, please go ahead.
He said,
yeah, sorry. As somebody who's feeling like what I would say to a friend, that doesn't sound like love, but
he said, he came back. He stayed overnight with me. When I got up, I asked him how he slept because there's a time change, and he said, I didn't sleep well. I have to tell you something. And he said, I fell madly, deeply, completely, entirely in love with another woman.
Oh my gosh.
While I was away. And I, of course, asked him, and did you consummate that? And he said, I held off for the longest time, but then, yes, we finally did. And I'm like, the longest time. You were only gone for 12 days.
For goodness sakes.
But also, I was going through menopause at that point in time. I had just started menopause, and I was felt like I was living in a foreign country with my body. Like for the first time in my life, like I just did not feel at home in my body. And I was feeling like I was, chubby and gaining weight. I didn't understand why I was gaining weight. And I was tired all the time, and I was having headaches, and I was just really going through a lot of, hot flashes and the sweats. And I felt terrible. And he also shared that she was 20 years younger, and he was a publisher, and she was looking to get published. And I thought, oh my God, this is just awful. But it was a really difficult, really, really difficult thing for me to pull myself back together after that loss, because it shook my sense of femininity. It shook my sense of sexiness. It shook my sense of being desired and wanted.
Yeah.
And I have never felt before as if I wasn't sexy. It's not that I am the most beautiful or sexy woman in the world at all, but I've never questioned whether somebody who liked me would want to have sex with me. I never felt unbeautiful. I never thought I was model beautiful. I never felt unbeautiful. I happen to really enjoy sex. I love sex. I love a great sex life. And I've had one, with the men that I've had relationships with. But after that loss, I sort of seized up, and I closed up. And I became extremely protective. And I was not an open, loving person in a dating context. I was scared of everybody and scared of everything. And I didn't love myself. And I really fell off a limb.
Yeah. Well, first of all, heartbreak is painful, like a breakup, but a betrayal takes it to a whole other level. And the fact that he went to be with somebody 20 years younger when you were at, like you said, going through menopause and like for the first time in your life, having a different relationship with your sense of sensuality and your connection to yourself and your body, and having to have that like shake up, I feel like probably added a huge other layer of pain. Like 20 years younger. And I mean, there must have been a part of you that was thinking like midlife crisis for him.
They ended up marrying. So, it wasn't a fling.
Interesting.
The betrayal,
Yes.
the betrayal was shocking. And I don't know if you watched Shrinking season 2, but I absolutely loved Shrinking season 2. And there are many reasons why I loved it. But there was a moment when one of the primary male characters who is grieving his wife in a really bad, sort of going through a really bad phase of grief with his wife and doing all kinds of really toxic things, is buying a car for his daughter. And he goes to buy a car, and the woman who's selling him the car, for whatever reason, they have some energy, but they get into a conversation, and that woman who's selling the car shares that her husband had cheated on her, and that's why she was single. And she looks at him and she says, "What would you rather have? Would you rather be widowed from somebody who loved and cherished you? Or would you rather have a relationship end from somebody who betrayed you?" And I can answer that question because I have now gone through both. And being betrayed was so difficult for me to bounce back from.
Yeah.
And that is a different kind of loss. And it's
Yes.
a different kind of damage
Yes.
than losing somebody who loved you, because it doesn't go to whether you're lovable.
Yes.
It doesn't go to whether you're a good partner. It doesn't go to whether or not you were desired. It doesn't hit at your self-esteem
Yeah. Yeah.
as a
It's,
partner.
yeah, no, it cuts deep. I understand from talking to you before the mics went on that you took some matters into your hands that I think maybe leads up to why you're in such a good place with dating. So talk to us about what you did to reclaim your power.
I, in some sense, I hit rock bottom because I was having, I went from having, relationships that, ended because, somebody decided to go back to their wife, or ended because, we just couldn't figure out, how to spend time together. But
Yes.
those are not crummy endings. And I would say I'm friendly. I'm not in touch, good friends with any of those men, but they all ended up on good terms. But then I went through a series of dating, and I just feel like I was drawing people to me who were toxic and damaging.
Interesting. Because you were in a different place energetically, weren't you?
Because I was in a different place. I was not open
Yeah.
and loving and vulnerable and happy and optimistic.
Yeah.
And how can somebody love you if you have a protective layer around you? How can they even get through to your heart if your heart is not open?
Yeah. Well, that was your protective mechanism because you weren't ready to let somebody break your heart or have that risk of somebody breaking your heart again.
And I went out on a date or two with a guy I was really interested in, and a really wonderful person. And he had mentioned to me the first time we met that a previous girlfriend of his was an actress on a television show that has really beautiful, sexy women on it. And I remember leaving that date thinking that he was a really wonderful person that I'd like to get to know. But I was absolutely convinced that he would never find me sexy enough or beautiful enough, and that it would never work out. He asked me to dinner after that. And when I went to the dinner, I was so nervous. I had convinced myself that he couldn't find me lovable. And
Oh.
I was so nervous. I was so protected. I was so cramped.
Yeah.
I couldn't find an emotional line or connection with this person. And, we went back to his place after the date. We started to kiss. I was like I kind of freezing up a little bit. And we went home. And of course, he sent me a note saying that he didn't think we were a match. And of course, he didn't think we were a match. You know what I'm saying? Like, I wasn't, I didn't, I was just so closed. I was so frightened. I was so scared, and I had so many layers, and I was so nervous.
Yeah.
And I couldn't, ask him questions about himself. I just was, anyway.
Oh, Dish. No, this is so good because it's real. This is relatable. Like when you put yourself out there, there is the risk you're going to get your heart broken.
And it's like I couldn't handle it again.
Yeah, that makes sense, though. It was too soon. It was too soon.
Well, in truth, it was 4 or 5 years, Michele.
It was. No, listen, here's the thing. It shook something to your core. You use those words. I mean, it brought you to a different place within yourself. And so there's, I know a gift on the other side, because like I said, we had talked about it before the mics went on, but I think you should have a lot of compassion for yourself.
It was 4 or 5 years of going out on dates with men who really were not open and available, who had come out of extremely damaging divorced marriages. And I was attracting what I was giving out, you
Yeah,
know.
I got
Um,
you.
anyway, so after that, I'll call it a fiasco with that wonderful man. I um, I said, Dish, you've got to fucking get your act together. You are not going to go through the rest of your life in this state. You're just,
Yep.
you are not. This is the end of the line here.
Do you mind sharing how old you were when you had this mindset? Only if you feel comfortable doing that. You
Um,
don't have to. We can edit this out.
so I was in my late 50s when I did the shift and said I had to. I so I was probably 58. You feel free to use that age. I'm trying to figure out pinpoint at the moment. So I would have been 58, I think. Yeah, 58. So um, I I just was determined to get myself back on track in a loving way. And I know this is going to sound ridiculous, but I went at it full force on every level. First of all, I had to feel beautiful again. So I started, I read the Peter Attia book, Outlive. I went on that program. I cut sugar. I cut flour. I worked out. I did not drink anything. I worked out every day. I played tennis every day. I lost a bunch of weight. I got very physically fit. I felt very good about myself physically. And I also engaged my therapist many more days a week. We did a deep dive on my emotional state. We did a deep dive on who I was attracted to and why I was attracted to people who really couldn't offer love,
Yes.
and were coming out of toxic places. We did a deep dive on the own shit that I was bringing to these dates. And I became so humble about the issues I have and what was blocking me and what I was bringing to dates. And I know this is going to sound ridiculous. I learned how to style my hair. I learned how to put on makeup. I've never been a person who did a lot of hairstyling or wore a lot of makeup. And I thought it would be so fun. And I went to New York City and I got a 3 or 4 hour makeup counseling session. Somebody taught me how to do like cat eyes. And it was just so much fun because I was a professional woman, a lawyer, as you said, and I really did not. And I learned how to style my hair and make curls. And I did a kind of complete deep dive across the board of myself physically and emotionally to get myself together. And at one point, I started getting fixed up a lot again. This was probably last summer. Yeah, last summer. So the summer of 2024. And I got fixed up with a couple of men, and one of them in particular, his long-term girlfriend had passed away in the last couple of months, and he was in town where I was for the summer, and we were being fixed up to hang out, but there wasn't an idea that we were going to become a romantic match because it was too early for him, and we talked on the phone about that, but we thought we'd have dinner and we had a lot in common. And we met and we went for a long walk, and he's a big reader and I'm a big reader. And we had an absolutely, absolutely wonderful time. And he said afterwards, would you like to go out to dinner? And I said, sure. So we met for dinner. And I decided, even though we had decided that we weren't going to start dating, I decided it would be the great moment for me to try out this new feminine and loving persona that I had worked so hard on. And I spent like 3 hours getting ready for that date. I put on this like fabulous music, and I took a bath in like lavender bubbles, and I did my hair and I did my makeup, and I tried on various dresses, and I picked this really like lovely, lovely dress. And he picked me up, and we walked over to the restaurant for dinner, and we were sitting at the table having dinner, and he stops talking for a moment. And I looked over at him, and he said, oh my God, I'm so sorry. You're so beautiful. You are such a beautiful woman. It just took my breath away for a moment. And I started crying at the table. We were at this very fancy restaurant, San Ambrose in Southampton. And I wasn't weeping, but I got some tears, and they went down my face. And he said, why? What did I say? I'm so sorry. And I said, that was so powerful. I've been putting so much effort into feeling that way again for myself. And to have you so open-heartedly say that it's just felt so good. And from that moment, the moment of that man telling me how beautiful and sexy I was, my dating has been so wonderful. I go out on every date, and instead of being worried about being rejected because I'm not beautiful and sexy enough, I know that I'm beautiful and sexy. So I put that aside, and I'm focused on the other person.
Beautiful.
I just want to know them. I want to hear their story. I want to learn what they like to eat, what they like to read, what they like to watch. I want to hear about their kids. I am not worried about me. That's done. I know that I'm fun. I know that I'm interesting. I know that I'm loving. I know that I'm a good partner. And now I feel beautiful and sexy. And so I'm taken care of on my end, and I feel open-hearted, and I just am so interested in them. And of course, there's nothing more sexy than being across the table from somebody who's like truly interested in you, right? So all of those dates, you get done with the dates, and the guys are like, oh my God, that was the best freaking date I've ever been on.
Oh my goodness. Can I just say, when you shared that, I literally like felt this like desire to like cheer, like hands up in the air, like, yes, like I feel like my audience is, you're doing such a beautiful job of like, first of all, allowing us in so personally and vulnerably. So thank you for doing that, because like I said, there are women who haven't embarked on this or are, and maybe aren't feeling confident, or feeling so vulnerable, feeling so nervous, feeling, maybe not comfortable in their own skin. And so we're seeing the transformation that you went on, and you took your power back, Dish. That's what I'm hearing. You took your power back. And now you're approaching it with that sense of openness and play that you did when you first started dating after you lost your husband.
I agree. I actually think that I'm dating so much, better than I dated in my 20s. And trust me, in my 20s, I'm sure I was like much hotter by any ordinary standard. But the dating for me now is so much better, more intentional. I know what I want to do on dates. I know what the purpose of dating is. I have I want to call it, it sounds goofy, but I kind of have a strategy around it.
Okay, well, you're going to have to share some of that now because I think the women listening, that's what they're here for. They want, like, what is the purpose? Like, what is the approach, Dish? What can you share?
Well, let me just say, when you're dating in your 20s, you're all just kind of knocking into each other. Like, you know what I mean? That's like, it's like, you know what I mean? But first of all, let me just tell you, the world is full of love. There are so many interesting, wonderful, loving men out there. They are out there. If you are a fun, interesting, loving, open-hearted person, you are going to find somebody. I have a lot of thoughts on what's working for me, and this is a tactical one. But know what is the best date setup for you.
Okay,
Like,
say more. What does that mean?
what puts you in the situation where you are the most comfortable, the most yourself, and the most at ease. Okay. And then if you can, and you can't always, sometimes, a lot of times people ask on a date, they have the plan, right? But if you can, put yourself in a situation where you are the most relaxed and comfortable. So I've learned what types of dates at the very beginning work the best for me. And so for instance, I don't like coffee dates. A lot of people like them. That's fine. I don't like coffee dates. I don't like any first date that involves a table between me and another person and doesn't allow for a lot of kind of casual back and forth and maybe like casual touching, like so what I really like and I like a first date where I am getting dressed up in something that is feminine and sexy.
Yeah.
Which you don't do on a coffee date. I
Yes.
want this to be clearly a potentially romantic situation because it puts me in my most open-hearted feminine space. So I don't want to go and sit at a coffee with the table between the two of us. For whatever reason, that always devolves into an interview-like situation. Where you're asking, so where did you go to college? You know what I'm saying?
Totally. Yes.
So I went on a date with a guy and I got stuck behind the railroad tracks. So I was a little late. So I texted him and I said, I'm going to be a little bit late. I'm stuck behind the railroad tracks. And he said, no problem. I'll be at the bar. And when I walked in the bar, he had like a bourbon in his hand. And I walked up to him and he made some joke about, the train and me making up the train and really being late or whatever. And it was funny. It was a funny joke. And so he immediately, within 1 second, had me laughing. Because we were standing next to each other at the bar, I sort of like hit the top of his arm.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like
totally.
Like as in that is so funny.
Yeah.
Good one. And then I said something funny back in riposte, like back to him, like my response to him, kind of like about the train or whatever. I said something to me. And so he touched me on the arm and he said, oh my God, that's so great. So then we decide to go get our table. But as we go get our table, we're already touching each other. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like,
I get it.
In each other's space and we're touching. So we've already made a connection. And so he's, is going to put his hand like on my back as we walk to the table. And we're sitting at the table and we're already laughing. We've broken the ice within like the first 3 seconds. We broke the ice and we're like, we have rapport and we're laughing and we get up at the end of this date and we have nothing in common. This guy's not a match for me. Let me be clear, like we're going through and we're talking and as like, we're discussing things, I'm thinking, oh my God, this guy is like so not a long-term partner for me. But I'm so enjoying his company and we're laughing. And we're leaving the restaurant. And I said, well, thank you, Paul. That was a wonderful date. Thank you. And he's like, what are you talking about? That was a great date. We didn't end up going out again, but the date was fun. And I think it put us each in a situation where we could best show who we were and best see whether we had a connection or could make a connection, because it was fun and playful and relaxed and funny. There were no interview questions. At one point, he said to me, and I now use this on all my dates. He said to me, okay, if we were going to leave here right now and get on a plane and go on a vacation, just the two of us, where would you want us to be? Okay, that's a great date question. That's not, how long have you been dating? What happened? What went wrong with your last relationships? Like, where'd you go to college? Are you over your dead husband? It's imagining the two of you on a vacation. Where would you be? What a fun thing that is to do on a date.
Yeah, that's actually really sweet. And I love this so much because you're giving the women like something tangible. And also, there wasn't going to be a second date, but that doesn't mean that the date couldn't be fun. And also, part of why you're on the date is to figure out if you want to have that second date. And so it's okay if you're sitting there thinking, there's not going to be another one, but you can still bring your best self to it. And that question is actually sweet. It reminds me of dating in my 20s and having a date with this guy. I did date him for a little while, but it was sweet where he asked something like that. Like, if you had $1 million today, what would you do with it? Or like, yeah, thinking into the future where you're like, it's just playful. There's play.
It's playful. Having fun on your dates is just so important.
Okay. But not everyone's probably showing up like that. But I wonder if like your energy is also helping to contribute to that. So let's think of the woman now who's listening and she's like, I've lost my husband. Maybe he's passed, or she's been divorced. And she's like, oh my gosh, Dish, this sounds great, but I'm so nervous. I'm so scared to put myself out there. I don't even know where to begin. Like, do I do the dating apps? Do my friends set me up? Like, let's just talk about how do you meet somebody? Sounds like you're dating pretty well. Like, are you getting set up? Like, give us some advice around where to meet people.
So, the dating apps are a whole thing to master. And I think yes to the dating apps.
Can you give us one or two that are decent, that are reliable? Because I think people are also worried that there's going to be some psycho that ends up.
I would not go on a dating app without getting advice from a person who is an expert in dating apps.
Okay, got you.
They give you tips on safety. They give you tips on how to figure out whether somebody appears to be serious about finding a relationship. They give you a lot of tips. Personally, I follow a woman, and I'm going to text her name to you afterwards so you can tell your listeners.
Yeah, I'll put it in the show notes, ladies. Go ahead. Yes.
On Instagram, and I think she's absolutely aces on online dating.
Okay, perfect.
You'll be able to put that in your notes.
Yep.
I'm on and off the apps. I'm never on the apps more than like for 4 weeks because it's very time consuming and you get exhausted from it. I have met such wonderful men when I've been on the apps.
Okay.
I have a protocol that I do for myself on the apps, which is that I don't answer anyone who just gives one word responses to my questions. I don't answer back if somebody, sends me a note on the online app and all they say is like, "Hey, beautiful, great photo." I don't do any of that. If somebody actually reads my profile, finds something in my profile that they like, and they send me a substantive note, those are the only people that I engage with. I always talk with them on the phone before I go out with them.
Yeah.
I have a few things that are important to me that I get out on the phone, and I try to get them out in a way that makes the phone call still fun. Like for one thing, for whatever reason, for a while, I kept going out on dates with men who are deathly allergic to dogs. And I have never lived without a dog. And I don't want to put us through that. Like at one point, I've gone
The
on.
dogs are going to win. Let's be honest,
exactly.
Dish, right? The dogs win every time. Yeah.
So,
no, dogs aren't going anywhere.
So I have a few things like that. I get all that. I get all that out on the phone.
Nice.
Before I even go out on the date. Things
Smart.
that are
deal breakers. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Smart.
I want to know that they're financially responsible, and I try to figure that out on the phone call by saying things like, what are your favorite restaurants, or where, like what kind of car do you drive? But I don't need them to be rich. I'm trying to figure out whether they're financially responsible. I have some questions that I ask depending on how that conversation goes.
Yeah.
Then when we do the first date, as I said, I don't like coffee dates. I usually try to do something playful and say something, oh, let's come up with something sexier than that or something like that. Do you know what I mean? Like, I always meet in a place where there's plenty of parking. So it's in a crowded restaurant with plenty of parking.
Perfect.
For a first date. I have a series of questions that I want answers to kind of like on the first date, even though I'm trying to make it playful. So I try to, I try to stage it.
Yeah.
But I came up with that protocol after having hired a few experts in online dating, and I use Bumble.
Oh, that's the app. I was going to ask if you do use that. Does that skew younger or no? Apparently, no.
Well, I have found plenty of men my age on Bumble.
Yeah. I was just curious. I don't know enough. I don't know anything about it. Somebody had asked about a specific one.
Talkify.
Talkify. I don't know about that. Somebody had written in about that one to ask, because you have to pay a lot of money too.
Okay. So I had actually, when Talkify first launched, I looked into Talkify, and to Talkify's credit, when I talked to them about my age parameters and other parameters, I want somebody who has some disposable income. I had gone through a series of dates with men who were the primary breadwinners, and they had 3 kids in college, and really lovely men. But we could basically never go out to dinner. They had being divorced is very, very expensive. And they were in a period of their lives where they had absolutely no disposable income. And so I don't need fancy. I need financially responsible, but I also do need to go out to dinner every once in a while. I need to go on vacation every once in a while. You know what I mean?
Yeah. What you want. So let me just slow it down just a little bit, because for the women listening, so they should know what they are like. They should have expectations of not expectations. They should have clarity around what it is that they're looking for, and what would a deal breaker look like, and what, that kind of thing. I just want to dig in a little. Yeah. Okay.
In terms of, I think Talkify actually asks you
what
your income requirements are, what your geographical requirements are, your age requirements. And this was very, very early on with Talkify, and I actually paid them. And they said that they had to do some research to see if there were enough, men who met my parameters in the area that I was living in. Yeah. And they came back to me and they said it was that they were sending me my money back, that they did not have enough men in my age group who met those parameters, because they hadn't really launched in that geographic area yet.
Yeah.
So they just,
it was early days. Yeah.
But I thought it was impressive that they did that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for sharing that for the person who was asking about it. Go ahead, please.
Yeah. So I would recommend you going through that process with them of asking them how many men are in the pool.
Yeah. I mean, do you think I don't know, do you pay on Bumble too? Do you pay on these dating apps? I don't
Yeah,
know.
there's a subscription there. You can do free versions and subscription versions depending on pay versions depending on what rights and services you want.
Okay. So you've had experiences hiring like a dating service or dating coach,
Oh my gosh, I've had dating coaches. Yes.
but is it worth it in your opinion, or is it, I feel like what you're saying now is just relatable. This is partially why you're here. Like I said, it's the girlfriend's guide to midlife dating. Like get advice from somebody who's been out there and kind of, figured some of this stuff out because if you're new to it, yeah, you're worried about your security. It's like there's so many layers. So you just want to have as much of a positive experience on the reentry as possible so that you can feel hopeful that you'll meet somebody who's quality and that you can enjoy yourself with and figure out what you both want together.
I think that if you haven't dated for, 20, 30, 40 years and you've gone through a divorce and you're just getting out and you have some spare money, hiring a dating coach probably is extremely helpful. And
Oh,
here's
good to
why.
know. Please.
Here's
Yeah.
why.
Yeah.
Because your friends give you really bad advice.
Okay, say more about this because this is a question I had for you. Yes.
Okay.
What do you want friends who want to set you up? What do they
I
need
think
to know about this? Yes.
like they love you
Yes.
and they haven't dated since they were in their 20s. And they
Yes.
have all of these, like they give you like all this advice and you follow it because you don't know better. And they're in a marriage, right? So maybe they know what they're talking about. And it's so bad. And it just so is not relevant to dating in midlife, you know? Um,
This is so
the,
good, Dish. Okay, so go ahead,
here's
please. This is good.
so here's what I say. So first of all, if somebody wants to fix me up, I got this advice from a woman who was the head of her sorority in the South, and she really, really knows about dating and fixing people up. And I got this advice, and it wasn't that long ago. It was like a couple of years ago. We were at a dinner party together, and she said, if somebody wants to fix you up and they start saying to you, what are you into? What do you look for in a man? Do you play tennis? Do you play golf? Do you like to hike? You say to them, if you know a man between X and Y ages, and she said, for you, 12 years older, 4 years younger. That's what she said to me. 4 years younger, 12 years older. If you say them, if you know a man in my age range and you like him, you think he's a good person, fix us up. He and I will figure out whether we're each other's types, what we have in
Perfect.
common, and whether there's chemistry.
Yeah.
Do not have your friends do the filtering for you.
That's good advice.
I play golf and I have so many people who think that they can only fix me up with men who golf. I have a lot of women that I play golf with. I actually don't, that's not really what I need a man for.
You don't need another golf date. You want a nice dinner date.
Yes. It's so funny, So, and I have girlfriends who say things like, if he texts you, wait 2 days before you text him back. Or if he call or don't text him after the date, wait for him to text you, or all these rules, which are just absolutely ridiculous.
They probably come from the rules from that guy that said he's not that into you from 20 years ago or something silly like that.
From my male friends, I will tell you the number one thing that they say that annoys them is that dating for men our age is so much more work than it is for women. They are the ones who ask you out. They make the dinner reservation. They pay for the dinner, usually at our age. That's what usually happens. So they've put a lot of work into going on the first date. And they say that the thing that is so annoying to them is being taken for granted and not appreciated. And
they want to hear you had a good time.
And I always text them, depending on the time of the day, the next morning or even that night, if it's like, we did something earlier, like had a cocktail or something like that. and thank them for all the effort that they put into the date. Thanks for making finding the place. It's on a Friday night, making the reservation, thanks for traveling to my neighborhood. Thanks for all the thinking. That was so incredibly thoughtful of you. And I don't play games around texting. If I get a text and I can answer the text, I answer the text.
Yeah.
I don't text too much, and I don't think you want to get into a situation where you're in a texting relationship with somebody, before you've actually met them.
Yeah.
But I also got this advice that I think was really bad after I became widowed, and that was essentially find a man, any man. Being part of a couple is like the entree to a social life at our age.
Ouch. What the heck?
And you are better off having a man than being alone, because you'll be cut off of, out of the social world. And then the further guidance on that was, you need a man to find a man. No man will find you attractive, or I would say men find you more attractive if you're with a man. And I think that's pretty bad advice. I think that it made me feel it made me feel a level of desperation that wasn't helpful.
Yes, that's not fair.
And I think that what I know now from a period of very successful, happy dating is that being in a happy, comfortable place with your life, where you don't but you don't desperately need somebody to complete you, because you're standing on your feet.
So good.
And you feel strong, so you can be open-hearted and loving.
Yeah.
And you can be vulnerable.
Yeah.
You can open yourself up. That's where you're dating best. And so what that might take for anyone is taking a period away from dating and pulling themselves together. I will now, if I go through a horrible breakup, I will not date for 3 or 4 months, because I have learned that I attract the wrong people to me when I am in a bad emotional state. When I am upset, and I'm not even necessarily pining away from my ex, but I am suffering the loss of that break. I am not drawing healthy people to me, because I am not a loving, open-hearted, vulnerable, strong person. I am a protective, scared person.
Yes. That's such powerful and important advice. I mean, I remember that one bad breakup I had when I was younger. I didn't miss the relationship. I missed myself. That's what I was looking to rebuild, was my relationship with myself. So I love what you're saying, because I think at whatever age your heart gets broken, especially if there's a betrayal involved, like we talked about, tending to you and reclaiming you and loving on you is absolutely brilliant advice and the best place to start. We've covered a lot, and I've loved this so much. I mean, literally, this could be like a part 2 and part 3. But before we wrap up today, Dish, I'm just wondering, I'm not even going to ask you any other questions. Is there anything else that you feel like I really want somebody out there who's embarking on dating again to take away from this conversation?
Make it playful. You're not supposed to know or decide after 1, 2, or 3 or 4 dates whether that person is the one. The point of dating is to get to know people and to have fun and be playful. So don't take any one person too seriously, or the dating process too seriously early on. Go in with a curiosity about knowing, getting to know somebody. Go in with a great deal of humility because you're bringing your own shit to the table, but with loving heart and curiosity.
Love it.
And don't have a checklist.
That's interesting because I think back in your 20s, it's like, make sure you have your list. It's like some of these lists were probably impossible for any one person to fulfill anyway. So I think that, go ahead.
Have one more thing, which is,
yes,
if you do find that you're attracting problematic men or toxic men, or you feel like you keep encountering the same, like a self-absorbed or whatever it is, look at yourself. Look at whether you have any core issues. Your own sense of self-worth is not there. Look at yourself and see why you are picking people like that, why you are attracting people like that, why you are attracted to people like that. Take some time off. Think through yourself. Seek help.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's another important part is like, don't go through this alone. Like, get the support you need. Do the dating coach, get the therapist, get the personal trainer if you can afford it, right? It sounds like,
get the makeup lesson.
Get the makeup lesson. Get the hair. No, I love that.
To wear makeup, and I never was a big makeup person before, but can I tell you how much fun it was?
Yes, I love that. Well, basically, you were filling your own cup. You were like pursuing what made you feel more empowered, more beautiful, more sensual, more yourself. And you even did things like you said, you didn't really wear makeup before, but you discovered something new and fun. So it's a lot of it is the mindset and the way that you approach it. Are there any books you read, or I don't know, any other resources that you turn to for like solid information?
Oh God, this is good. Michele, we did not even talk about sex.
I told you we're gonna have to do like a part two and all of it.
There is a book that I read that's absolutely excellent about having sex in midlife. And I read it cover to cover while I was dating in midlife because I thought it helped me to understand what was happening with my body sexually. And more importantly, with my partner's body sexually. And it gave me a lot more confidence in dating, because dating is going to end up, leading to sex. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And I will send you the name of that.
Okay. Send me the name of that. So ladies, as you're listening, in the show notes will be a link to Dish's newsletter. It will be a link to, I'll even link Peter Attia's book, Outlive, because I know that was an excellent book. The dating apps, you were going to send me some woman that you followed that you said has really solid advice. Like everything we talked about today will be in the show notes. It'll be over at thegoodlifecoach.com or right on your podcast player. But Dish, thank you for such a vulnerable and beautiful conversation. I loved what you shared today. And I think it's so helpful for, any woman out there who's embarking on this again or trying to date and enjoy the process and stay hopeful and excited and bring the play into it. I think you just shared so many beautiful things, and I'm so grateful for your time today.
Oh, thank you. I really hope it helps somebody.
I know it's going to. I'm married and I'm sitting there going, yes, this is so good. It's so good. You did. I know that you did. And feel free, ladies, to write into the show. If you're not on the newsletter, I'll also have a link to that in the show notes, and send some feedback. It's always so good to hear when something's touched you and made an impact. But Dish, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. I really loved it.
Hey friend, I have one request before we sign off today. If you've gained any value from any of the interviews that you've tuned into, would you take just 1 minute and leave a 5-star rating and review over on Apple Podcasts? It's actually how more women can find the show, and I want to continue growing a community of women who are loving themselves and living full on. So thank you for all of your support, and I look forward to being back with you next week. Bye for now.
This podcast is presented for entertainment and educational purposes only. Any information provided is not intended to be a substitute for medical, mental health, or other professional advice. Seek out your trusted healthcare provider or other qualified professional for all matters dealing with your health and well-being. Any opinions or information provided by a guest are their own and not those of Michele Lamoureux or the company.